Hello everyone, this is part 4 of this project. I hope you are enjoying what you've watched so far. I hope you enjoy this. Alright, so I got all the oil cooler bolt snug. Here is the torque wrench that we're gonna use. I already set it up. So I set my torque wrench to 106 inch-pound. So now we're gonna torque the bolt for the oil cooler. Now we're gonna crisscross them so that the gasket can be crushed evenly. So I'm gonna start with the center bolt. Again, we're torquing these bolts to 106 inch-pound. So just like that. I hope you heard the torque wrench click. So that's torqued. So now we're gonna go across that bolt. That's torqued. That's good. Once again, I'm torquing these bolts to 106 inch-pound. Alright, so this is torqued also. We got this torqued to 106 inch-pound. So now I'm gonna go around the oil cooler to make sure that all the bolts are torqued. Alright, so I have torqued all the bolts of the oil cooler. We torqued them down to 106 inch-pound, so we're good to go. So now the next step is gonna be installing our intake manifolds. So now I'm gonna remove the duct tape that I put over here to cover the mating surface of the intake manifold gasket. Great. So I'm gonna clean this. We're gonna wipe this down. As you can see, everything is cleaned. Everything looks nice and cleaned. So we're good to go. So we're gonna get our intake manifolds ready to go. We got new intake manifold gaskets installed. We have a new swirl motor installed, so we're good to go. So now let's take our intake manifolds to the vehicle so we can install them. So here comes our intake manifolds. They're gonna go in like this. Now we have to be careful. So now we have to make sure that everything is aligned So just like that, our intake manifolds are installed. Everything went in pretty smoothly and nicely. So now I'm gonna start installing our bolts, the intake manifold bolts. So now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that all the bolts get started, and then we're gonna torque them down. So I got all the bolts for the intake manifolds started. So now I'm gonna get them snug, and then we're gonna torque them down. I'm gonna start with the center bolts. All right, I got all the bolts for the intake manifold snug. So now I'm gonna grab my torque wrench so we can torque the intake manifold bolts. The torque spec for the intake manifolds is 141 inch-pound. So I got my torque wrench set up to 141 inch-pound. So now we're gonna torque these bolts. I'm gonna crisscross them. I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. So that's torqued. So now we're gonna torque this one over here. So that's torqued. I'm gonna torque this one. So that's torqued. So now we're gonna torque this one here. Alright, so we got all the bolts on the passenger side intake manifold torqued. So that's good. So now we're going to torque the bolt on the driver's side intake manifold. So this is torqued. So at this point, I'm gonna make sure that all the bolts get torqued down, and then we should be good to go. Alright, so we got all the bolts for the intake manifold torqued down to 141 inch-pound, so we're good to go. So now I'm gonna install the nuts that go over here. We got all the bolts of the intake manifold torqued down. So now we're gonna install our turbo pedal store. So these are the gaskets. So this is the turbo pedal store gasket. So I'm gonna install this over here. Okay, so I installed our brand new pedestal gasket. So I'm gonna remove this old one. This is the old pedestal gasket. So now we're gonna install our pedestal. So just like that, our turbo pedestal is installed. So now I'm gonna put the bolts in. Now these pedestal bolts, we're now gonna go super tight on them. Okay, so just don't go gorilla on these bolts. All right, so that's good. We have tightened the pedestal bolt. So now I'm going to install our exhaust gasket on the exhaust pipes back there. So this one is gonna go over here. Okay, so we got the first exhaust gasket installed. Now I'm gonna grab the second one. So here's the second exhaust gasket. So we're gonna install the second exhaust gasket here. All right, so I have installed my exhaust gasket. So we're good to go. The turbo pedestal is installed. We tightened the bolts of it, and we got new gasket on the exhaust manifolds, so we're good. So now the next step is going to be installing the turbo. I'm going to bring up our turbo here. We're going to get it prepped. Okay, so I'm going to remove this bolt over here. We're going to remove this old gasket. I'm going to sand this surface off just a little bit. Okay, so that's it. And then I'm going to install my brand new gasket. Just like this. And then I can install the bottom bolt. And then we're gonna replace the gasket that goes over here. I'm gonna remove the old one. I'm gonna wipe this down. And then we're gonna install the new one. This is our new gasket. It's gonna go right here. I'm gonna turn the turbo up. We have to make sure that our gasket is not gonna fall. Okay, so we're good to go. So at this point, our turbo is ready to be installed. Okay, so we're good to go. So now let's install our turbo. So just like that, the turbo is sitting. So we're good to go. So now we're gonna start installing the bolt. We're gonna start installing the bolts back here. I don't know if you guys will be able to see, but let's see. Now I have some brand new bolts over here that we're gonna install. Okay, so it's recommended to replace these bolts when you do this job. So we're gonna install our new bolts. Now I'm gonna bring the camera down here after I get all the bolts started. So we got the first 3 started. So now we're gonna install the 3 that goes on this side. So now I'm gonna install the bolts on this side. So it's difficult to show you what I'm doing back here, but I am going to bring you guys back here when I get all the bolts started. Now I'm going to install the turbo pedestal bolts. And these bolts, we're actually putting brand new bolts over here. So now I'm gonna install the bolt for the turbo bracket. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this piece of sharp rag between the socket and the bolt so that the bolt doesn't fall. Okay, just like this. Okay, and then I'm gonna go in here. Okay, so that one is installed. So these bolts over here, we replaced them. So I'm gonna get these out of the way. So now we're gonna start tightening the bolt for the turbo bracket. All right, so that's good. All right, so I got these bolts tightened. So now I'm gonna tighten the bolts of the exhaust manifolds. All right, so we got the first 3 tightened. All right, so we got all the back bolts tightened. So now I'm gonna show you all the bolts that I tightened, and then we're gonna lift up the vehicle so we can install our catalytic converter. So we tightened this bolt over here, and then there's this one. Okay, and then these ones over here. So the new bolts that you're seeing over here are the bolts that I was tightening. As you can see, we got new bolts and new gaskets installed, so we're good to go. So now let's install the DPF. We are back under the vehicle. Now we're gonna install our catalytic converter. So just like that. So that's good. I'm gonna install a brand new exhaust clamp over here. I'm gonna get this exhaust clamp just snug on to keep this pipe from falling. So just like that for now. We need some play up here to install the brackets and everything else that we need to install up behind the turbo. So we should be good to go here. Okay, so now let's lower the vehicle. I don't want to install the cross member yet, because if I install the cross member, I'm not going to have this play to install the brackets and the EGR cooler assembly. So now let's lower the vehicle so we can install the EGR tube and the EGR cooler assembly and the catalytic converter bracket. So now let's lower the vehicle.